Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth day of the GovTech week. This week, we're exploring the GovTech topic and trying to understand how can technology and startups disrupt the way public sector works. Today, we will focus on digital democracy, or rather, how does digital change democracy? On the one hand, we have seen digital tools making politicians and policymakers closer to the people, interacting directly with way more people than they could physically, or providing tools to collect opinions of higher number of people without significant costs. At the same time, has it simply created an appearance of more democratic participation, giving a free pass to politicians, thus sharing a Facebook post increase our activism and civic engagement, or has it given us a satisfactory minimal step, which we increasingly stop doing? We'll touch upon these questions throughout the day. Today, we'll have a traditional structure as other days: one keynote presentation, two discussion, and one fireside chat. If you want to check the program more in detail, please go to govtechweek.com. Although most of the questions for the panel discussions have been already gathered from a wide range of stakeholders, please use the chat to network with other individuals joining the conference. Let's start with our first keynote, Digital Citizen, Digital Government, or Digital Democracy, delivered by Robert Bjarnason, President at Citizens Foundation Iceland.
Good morning. My name is Robert. I'm from the Citizens Foundation in Iceland. We're really happy to be a part of this virtual GovTech week, and I'm going to talk about digital democracy and citizen participation. So, Citizens Foundation was founded as a non-profit in 2008, and coming from a long tradition of democracy in Iceland. So Iceland has one of the world oldest running parliaments. It was founded in the year 930, so it's been ongoing for more than 1100 years. And 100 years ago, the political system in Iceland was quite similar to political systems in other countries, and still today, where people can go to vote every 4 years. And people sometimes used to go on horseback, or they used to walk maybe for a few days to go to the polling place. And then they, often even met the representative in the street. There's not that many people around that time. But then the modern time came quickly. We had the car in the 30s, the first computers in the 60s. The internet was with us in 1993. But the political system hasn't evolved very much. And so we actually started our work as sort of a direct response to the financial crisis in 2008. So that in over a period of 10 days, all the commercial banks in Iceland went bankrupt. So and trust in society, in terms of trust in the parliament and the government, had been, for over 1,000 years, pretty good, pretty high. Obviously, ups and downs, but, often in the territory of 60–70% of people trusting in our institutions. But after the financial crisis hit, then that plummeted down to like 7%. And people took to the street and were just really surprised, how could this happen? How could this happen in a society, a modern Nordic society, that the government and the business people would sort of let the public down in this way. And we started our work. I was actually living in London at the time, and we thought, how can we use the internet to actually give regular citizens more influence? And so we started to develop open source software, and our mission is to help connect governments and citizens, and using state-of-the-art technology platforms, artificial intelligence, and so on. And we really believe that for democracy to work, for governments to work going forward in the future, we need more participation of regular citizens. There needs to be a way of having the whole of society involved in the transformation of the digital transformation of society, of the transformation that's coming about because of artificial intelligence and automation. It's not only that we need to give citizens, that we have some duty to give citizens, more participation. It's just the fact that the world is getting more and more complex. So actually tapping into the collective intelligence of citizens is a really good idea. And so we've been around for 11 years, and we now have small offices in the US, in the UK, and the Netherlands. And our solutions, our open source solutions, have helped make decision-making better in hundreds of projects in over 20 countries. And for example, Better Reykjavik, and we also help the Scottish Parliament with some participatory projects. We've been doing 9 years of participatory budgeting, and mostly in Iceland, but also in some other countries, where all projects now have over a 12% participation rate, and the record is, in a municipality in Iceland, is 19.7%. So it's not the same as 60-70% in a parliamentary vote, but in a process that's growing every year and is totally online, and is about giving citizens power, but also helping to spend the city's budgets better. That's the key element here. Spend the budget on things that are really needed and people really, want to have implemented. So I'm going to give you an overview of 3 things here this morning. Of sort of 3 parts of our solution, if you like. So the first part, and sort of our sort of main solution, if you like, is called Your Priorities. And it's an open source idea generation and deliberation platform. And then we also have a secure budget voting tool, which also has a very strong civic educational component. This is called Open Active Voting. And then finally, and I'm going to talk shortly about this, is our new deep policy-making gamification platform, which was used for the first time to create a game about constitution making called Make Your Constitution, which we launched last year when we were doing a project with the Icelandic government about crowdsourcing some changes to the Icelandic constitutions that are sort of in the process in the government. But first, your priorities. So the key element of your priorities is to help build up trust between governments and citizens. It's an online solution that is designed for deliberation. It's not designed as a general social network or something like that. It's really designed to help bring about sort of a good dialogue, and it's been used all over the world. And the key element of it, are quite simple, is that citizens add ideas, about any subject. Is it policy, or is it about building something, or questions to parliamentarians? There's all sorts of different types of engagement, even surveys. But anyway, people add ideas, and then other people add points for and against those ideas. And we help create this sort of structured debate. And then people can vote other people's points up and down. And here are some screenshots, from it. You can see this is a project in Malta. And the key element, the key sort of feature why our solution works in actually bringing about that dialogue between citizens and government, and also between citizens in between themselves, as sort of in their common dialogue with the government, is our deliberation and debate platform. So the key of that is that it makes it really impractical to argue. It's not possible to comment directly on other people's point. So if I've written a really smart comment somewhere, and then my friend comes there and he sees how silly it is, he can vote it down, he can vote it up if he likes, if he wants to support me or something, but he can't go on there and say like, hey, this is a silly comment, Robert. Nobody can. So we've actually taken away the main weapon, if you like, of trolls. People can't troll me with my idea, but also it's people really can't get into sort of personal arguments and so on. And I think it nudges people into a bit more evaluatory mode, to evaluate things. And finally, in terms of our debating system, then it really, if there's 1,000 people who like an idea and 100 people who don't like it, and they have a debate for and against, the debate point of the minority, the 100 people, is actually at the same level in the user interface. And so it's so the minority view is not sort of over empowered by the majority, but also for practical reasons. And when you're talking about collective intelligence, there's sometimes only a very small minority of people who actually see a big problem with something, So that's often proven itself in a solution, is that, you have some ideas that a lot of people like, but then some people come, like the party spoilers, they come in and they write a point against it that is actually right and true, and actually it, makes the idea not viable, for example. Or in some cases, actually, by pointing something negative about it, then you can change the idea to accommodate that and to make it better. That's the key to actually, using this sort of deliberation to make better decisions. So here's an example from a project in Iceland where the part of the education policy of the city was partly crowdsourced on the Better Reykjavik platform in 2 stages. And here people are debating religious issues about the New Testament. And we had hundreds of people participate in this, and we didn't have to delete a single comment. It's pretty good. A really important element of your priorities is our sort of ever-increasing use of artificial intelligence, to help with different aspects of the engagement experience. So now in Iceland, we're really sort of a multi-language country with people living here from around the world. And so not everybody speaks Icelandic, but the local government wants people to participate because they live in those cities. And in some cases, in some municipalities, maybe 15-20% of people don't speak Icelandic. So we built into the platform really highly integrated machine translation. We also have recommendations, notifications. You can speak in your idea, just in voice, and we have AI that converts the voice to text. And then we also have quite a bit of tools for the city administrations themselves and the national government administrations in terms of automatic toxicity detection, where all the content that's coming in, it's automatically scanned for anything that's is toxic in terms of dialogue. And then we also have more and more sort of natural language processing analytics, including we now have ways of automatically basically using AI to calculate how similar ideas are. So we can cluster them together into similar, and if you have thousands of ideas, it's really useful to see the cluster of similar ideas, both to understand trends, but also to understand, sort of the bigger scope of why people are, potentially putting in those ideas. And here on the screen, you can see, like a text-based version of this, where the ideas are sort of, brought together. But we also have a 3D version. This is like a 3D force graph that brings the clusters out in 3D. And this is sort of a, so highly evolving states. Natural language processing AI is really sort of, it's in a stage of really fast evolution. It's getting better and better and better all the time. So we're really excited about this. And this is also really going to help, in terms of when we have, in larger projects, if you have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of ideas, then this sort of technology is going to be essential, both to find the trends, but also to find the outliers, to find the truly innovative ideas, for example. So, like you should watch this space. There's going to be a lot of, AI and that's going to be useful for, citizen and engagement going forward. So the key outcomes with your priorities is basically improved communities, but because there are better decisions. And, we're using, collective intelligence for the more ever increasingly complex world. You get useful collections of pros and cons for each idea. And for government, this is really useful. I mean, it's sort of the way that, the human brain sort of evaluates things, I mean, everybody really knows this concept. I mean, you think yourself, you're going to do something, you think, oh, it's okay, what are the pros and cons about that? It's a very natural thing to think of, and very useful for government to understand and from sort of a bottom-up way to get, more intelligence about what's happening. We have increased civic knowledge of the participants, and we have higher public acceptance and sophistication levels of when citizens' ideas are used. Here on the screen, there's just some of the projects we worked on, in Europe, and we work with a lot of, different entities and governments. I'm going to talk about a few example projects. First is Better Reykjavik. This is probably our best-known project. And we started our work in 2008. We did some experiments in 2009. But in 2010, we really had our open source platform sort of ready to go and ready for sort of the big mass, experiment. And so we launched it a week before the city election in 2010 in Reykjavik. And we offered all the political parties an area on the website. And we emailed them all at exactly the same time and everything. But only one of the parties really sort of jumped on it. And that party was actually, luckily for this project, that party called the Best Party was already sort of leading in the polls. So they jumped on it and said, hey, help us to come up with our program for the next 4 years. And they did not. That party was sort of a bit of an anti-political party. They was led by Iceland's sort of most famous comedian, Jongnar, and they really didn't have any real policies. I mean, they had joke policies, like putting a giant polar bear into the children's, petting zoo, things like that. But that worked, and they won the election, went into a coalition talk with the Social Democrats, and they told people, go to Better Reykjavik, help us to come up with ideas on how to improve the city and how to run the city for the next 4 years. And, quite a lot of the ideas from people then actually made it into a coalition agreement, that the Best Party and the Social Democrats went into. So it really worked. And one of the things was that one of the decisions, was that Better Reykjavik should become a part of the city website. And so we've been doing projects on Better Reykjavik now for over 10 years. And you can see here from the homepage, we actually have now over 25,000 registered users in a city that has about 100,000 people on its voting registry. And we do all sorts of different projects. I'm showing just some screenshots from my neighborhood project. This is the participatory budgeting project. And here you can see all the different neighborhoods are represented as groups in this view. So you have the downtown and all the different neighborhoods. And here you can actually see, and I really like this map, here you can actually see a map of where all the ideas are, where people, as they submitted it. And the great thing about this screenshot and this map is that the red idea dots, they basically trace the outline of the municipality. Exactly. I mean, where there are not no dots, there is no municipality. There's other neighboring municipalities that actually go into those little areas that are sort of carved out. So it's everywhere. It's mass participation in a sort of a new sort of democratic process. And here, just another screenshot, with some ideas from that year. So we also worked on, and I talked about it previously, on the education policy of the city of Reykjavik until 2030. And the city used many different methods to actually contact people. They had many workshops. They invited teachers and students and so on. And they did crowdsourcing on Better Reykjavik in 2 stages: in the beginning of the process and towards the end of the process. And it was really successful in terms of reaching people and giving people a chance of on commenting on something that's really important to them. And here you can see some screenshots from that. The first part was about deciding on the high-level goals of the policy, and then the second part about the sort of implementation detail. In the University of Iceland, the Student Council has a website on Better Reykjavik where they've been doing sort of all sorts of different sort of projects. We've done projects in, for example, in Estonia, where our platform was used in a project called People's Assembly, where a lot of people took part in an online process that then went into the output of the online process, then went into a randomly selected citizen assembly. And we really like that there's into sort of mixing, different types of methods, to sort of help to triangulate, what it actually means, what the will of the public, what the public wants, and to get the best ideas out. And there's a screenshot from that from an earlier version. And, and actually at the end of the process, there were actually some laws passed in the Estonian parliament, for example, and all to do with improving the democratic system. And including that you could have, 1,000 citizens can now send issues to the parliament that must discuss them. And 1,000 electronic signatures, basically. We've worked on last year, so briefly mentioned, on changes to the Icelandic constitution. And, again, this was really an exciting project because it was mixing together, many different types of engagement methods. So we used your priorities for an online deliberation. We created the Make Your Constitution game to help sort of with getting people into sort of the bit of a high-level view of sort of understanding a bit more about what constitutions are. We did campaigns on Facebook and YouTube, like paid campaigns, to actually promote, the participation. And then there was a deliberative poll, like in Estonia, where there's like a citizen assembly type event where 300 people randomly selected were spent a weekend, discussing the same things that were being discussed in the online deliberation and also in the game. And here you can see some screenshots from that. And, we broke it down into several different subject areas. And then in each subject area, you have the individual ideas. Those are also ideas there, more ideas. And then you click on one idea, then you can see the idea, and then the debate. And we had a really good debate about, all sorts of really important things. And actually, this idea on the screen is a really an important idea, that's being debated, and that's, for many people important. This is about the ownership of resources in the sea, if that should be sort of coded, in a better way in the Constitution. And when people debate, they love to debate. Everybody, people have different, some people have views on some ideas, other people have views on other ideas. But, there's a lot of interesting pros and cons for all the different ideas, and I learned quite a lot. The Scottish Parliament is using the platform for several different projects, and it's been doing the first one was about community well-being. They've been doing one about climate, policy, and the latest one they did was about COVID-19 and young people. Like that was about a month ago. So those sort of technologies, can really work on all sorts of different levels, in terms of governments, and it's being, the national or European or local or even like the micro level of communities. Here's just some screenshots from the Scottish Parliament page. We did a project with the state of New Jersey, called Innovation Engine, where the state of New Jersey was basically crowdsourcing ideas from within the employees of the city. Only employees of the state of New Jersey could actually take part. And with over 2,000 employees took part. It came with a lot of different ideas and a lot of debate about those ideas. And quite interesting to see, this being used, sort of, the platform's usually been used just by citizens talking to government, but there's a sort of government sort of talking to itself. It was quite exciting. And finally, on your priorities then, a public school in Australia has been using the platform, to teach, a class of 11 years old with about democracy, and they were really happy with this, and they sent us this nice photo. So next up, and is our open active voting tool, which is about budget voting and civic education. And I'm just going to go into this a little bit. It's about giving citizens direct influence on part of local government or even national government budgets, but also really to educate citizens about actually how much things cost, but also what it means to have a budget, and to help build up trust and make better decisions. So this is an example of the software. It's like like a modern mobile web app. It works great on desktop, but also on mobiles. And it's actually a bit sort of gamified. You're like the mayor, and you have all the money to spend in your neighborhood. So you get to choose what ideas are used for the budget. So, and then you choose and you select, you create a sort of fantasy budget, or what you would like the budget to be. And then all of those budgets are then sent securely to the server and then tabulated, and the projects that have the most vote, then they win and they get built. And we have now, it's been going since 2011, and we have over 900 projects that have been built, in Reykjavik, just in Reykjavik, but all the other municipalities around Reykjavik have also been, have also started to do this as well. So it's really something that over time helps build up trust and helps build up, this idea that citizens can, really have an influence. And the participation has been growing sort of over the past few years, and now in Reykjavik it's at 12.5%, but I say we had another municipality called Mosó, which is at 19.7%. And here are some, just some ideas from that have been built, some photos of projects that people came up with, just thinking about it, and then they brought it to the community, and the ideas that the community liked, they were the ones that got built, and all sorts of different things, that's really made those cities around, or those cities that those sort of processes take part, are better places usually to live. And finally, on my sort of list of tools, then. Or sort of list of solutions that we're sort of working on is open active policy, which is our deep policy-making gamification framework. And the idea is to basically educate citizens and on the connections and on the connection between their own values and different policy choices, but also on the values of potentially somebody else. And to help sort of democratize the understanding of policy. And so Make Your Constitution, as mentioned earlier, that was the first game that was used, that uses open active policy, and it really shows, tries to demonstrate the effect of values, versus constitutional policy choices. And here are some screenshots. You have a welcome. We do a little, very light, constitution quiz in the beginning, where you can, earn some what we call choice points that are then used in the game to make decisions. You basically create your own country, or you select from a list of different countries. You can do like, Iceland, in modern times, or you can do, Iran, after the fall of the Shah, to do all sorts of different types of, constitutions. And then you select, different types of constitutional sort of articles, and then you sort of start to build those together in this sort of main game interface. And then you use your choice points to basically, get your articles that you like into the constitution. And so this is obviously constitutional law. It's not, maybe people think it's not for everybody. But what we learned, I think, the most in terms of working on this game is that actually, constitutions, are among the most sort of simple and most easy to understand laws, because those are the base laws, and they're often, I mean, most constitutions are not like thousands of pages, but rather, concrete sort of, basis that most people, like, if they really think about it, they understand it. So finally, what have we learned? What are sort of our main sort of takeaways from our almost 12 years, doing citizen engagement projects and creating open source software? So the key element is that participation must be fun. It can't be like participating online. It can't be like this, hugely boring bureaucratic task of some sorts. So the user interfaces need to be simple. They need to be easy to understand, and you can't like just talk sort of bureaucracy to regular people. You need to use words and so on to that sort of bring them into the dialogue in a sort of positive way, and then reward citizens. Listen to them, use their ideas. And if the ideas are not used, that people are not listened to, then we might end up actually having participation projects that decrease trust. That's not what we want. But also inform citizens, even if you're not gonna use their idea, tell them why. People want to be listened to. Don't be afraid to say no, but just have a good explanation of the no. And the key is that so many projects fail on communication, on marketing budgets. I mean, we've seen too many examples of governments setting up those participation portals, and then the project starts, and basically everybody's just waiting for somebody to come. But just people won't come. It's like it doesn't work like that today. You have to actively market anything you want people to have awareness of. People don't really go to websites anymore. They consume feeds. And to get on those feeds, you need to pay. And that's really how it is. But when you do that and using the online ads and so on, I mean, it's really intuitive and it's not expensive, even for tiny municipalities, to spend a little bit of money to actually reach a lot of their own citizens. And finally, we are a non-profit, and we really believe that the future of digital democracy should be something that's open source, public, and developed for the common good. Thank you very much, and have a really nice day. Bye.
Thank you, Robert. What we have also seen surging in the past years, and especially this year, have been protests against structural inequalities, authoritarian leaders, as well as the climate crisis that we discussed on Monday. How has technology changed activism and civic engagement? For the discussion, Civic Expression in Digital Age, does digital empower or silence? I'd like to introduce Maxima Smilta, Head of Communication and Development Unit, European Humanities University, Edwina Sanda, co-organizer of Fridays for Future, Roman Osachuk, research assistant at Digital Forensic Research Lab, Maria Gevorkian, activist. Discussion will be moderated by Donatas Puslis, Head of Media Program at Vilnius Institute for Policy Analysis.
So, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to invite you to a discussion about the digital age and the civic expression, how the digital technologies change the way we are mobilizing as citizens for a particular social or political goals. I represent Vilnius Institute for Policy Analysis, a think tank from Vilnius. And today with us, we also have people who can discuss this topic not only from theoretical point of view, but are practitioners themselves participating in social movements, organizing them, or witnessing developments from inside. So with us we have Edwina Senda, who was one of the organizers of the movement Fridays for the Future here in Lithuania. Good evening. We also have with us Roman Osachuk, who works at as a Eurasia Research Assistant at the Digital Forensic Lab and was an active participant in Maidan events in Ukraine during the Revolution of Dignity. Good evening, Roman.
Good evening.
With us is Maximas Milta, who is the head of communication at European Humanities University and now is in Minsk, from where he helps us to better understand the developments happening in Belarus at the moment. Hello, Maximas.
Good evening, Donate. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you for being with us. And also we have with us Maria Gevorkian, who is one of the organizers of Black Lives Matter March here in Vilnius. Good evening, Maria.
Hello.
So let's start from the question which is written in the topic of this discussion. Does digital empower or silence? I think the easiest answer would be it's both ways. It can be used for good and for bad too. Probably Maximas, I can start immediately and tell how it is going on now in Belarus, where people, of course, use mobile technologies, other digital tools to mobilize, organize, protest against the regime, but also regime itself is using technologies to block the connections, to disconnect some web pages, make them unavailable to the citizens, and so on. I'm come from the sphere of journalism, so I'm more familiar how the digital technologies change the media environment, and I'm very curious to hear from you. So maybe you can start from discussing your experiences from the events that you were organizing, gathering people and so on. How did digital technologies help you? And probably let's start, Maximus, let's start with you. What you're witnessing now in Belarus and how the digital technologies are being used there.
Sure. Thank you, Donate. I will just highlight once again that I'm not organizing rallies or protest actions. Instead, I'm rather witnessing the developments happening here in Belarus, and I've been here since August the 1st, so it's been already a month. And indeed, what we are witnessing here is something that is not only reflected on the technological side, but in overall perspective. This is a genuine grassroots-driven mobilization of people. This is something that represents at its core a horizontal-driven mobilization of people of different ages, of different demography, of different geography than have we ever witnessed before in this country. Now, if we zoom in closer to a technological side, this is not a novelty. This is common for authoritarian regimes to crack down on independent media, to crack down on sources of communication and information that cannot be controlled. And this is something what probably is at the essence of authoritarian regimes, right? They want to control, or at least to have direct access to sources of information. And therefore, whenever technological advancement empowers more people with these tools, and these tools become more, I would say, egalitarian, evidently we see a completely different network how communication is spread. Now, let's talk retrospectives. I've been living in Belarus for quite a while. I've spent a huge part of my childhood in this country. So I recall pretty well, and I've been involved in 2006 presidential elections and 2010 as well. So basically, we talk about 14 years from now, 10 years ago, and evidently internet was well spread in this country, though no technologies of the scale of LTE and 4G, but nevertheless, people already had phones, but not smartphones. People already were able to surf the web, but they were not able to stream, right? So there is it's also essential to stress here the economical situation, right? Not so many people, let's say, were able to were capable of providing themselves with smartphones that would provide you not only the decent quality of web streams, for example, but also to maintain a continuous internet connection. So what has changed is that technology has become more accessible to people. And at the same time, this accessibility of technology has empowered people and has satisfied their internal demand for alternative sources of information. Therefore, in the year 2020, for example, the most vivid manifestation of the crackdown on internet has been here starting from August 9th till August 12th, when in the course of 72 hours, you have a nation of 9.5 million people, which essentially was turned off the internet. Although you could surf the state propaganda media, it can't be really called media; it's rather propaganda instruments. But you could not really access YouTube or social media or your Gmail, whatnot. And at the same time, this overall crackdown on internet connection has been instrumental in making a huge step forward for most of people here in the Belarus in learning what is VPN. What does it mean to use proxy connection in order to make your connection to the internet more secure? And lastly, it has given a huge impetus for Telegram Messenger, which differently from Maidan of 2013, 2014, different from Arab Spring, it's not Twitter, it's not WhatsApp. It is Telegram Messenger that is used predominantly in this country and serves as a key instrument of communication. There are certain metrics that we could provide here, and the Telegram, though not that much spread in our country, in Lithuania, but is a messenger that is used by more than 400 million users across the world. It is enormously popular in countries like Iran and others, and so obviously Russia and Belarus and elsewhere, where where people are keen on using this messenger, which is not only providing you end-to-end encryption of the connection, but also is enormously user-friendly in the way that it is reacting very fast on limitations of internet connection. And its founder, Pavel Durov, is quite a renowned figure in this, let's say, Russian-speaking space and elsewhere. So the most popular channel within the Telegram Messenger, and Telegram is organized in the way it's not only peer-to-peer connection, but you can also create channels and you can also create groups. So the most popular channel that is called Nechta in Belarusian, that stands for something, often mispronounced as Nexta. It's not Nexta, it's Nechta. So before the day of so-called elections, it had roughly 400,000 subscribers, which is quite a decent amount of users, given that we talk Belarus, 9.5 million population in total. So in the course of a couple of weeks, basically in the course of roughly 10-15 days, the amount of subscribers has not even tripled, it has quadrupled. So at this moment, you have 2.1 million subscribers, which is basically the ceiling for this channel. And this channel is managed by 4 people. And the average age of these guys is 25 years old. So that's the reality. Now you have quite a number of other channels with 400,000 people subscribers. And why would you need to use this messenger? For a very simple reason. The thing is that Belarus authorities have been continuously considering what are the possible avenues to basically crack down on internet connection. Even in 2001, when were the first elections, presidential elections, that already were basically falsified. Back then, internet was turned off, but this is 2001 is the age of dial-up connection to internet. It's not even ADSL type connection, right? So therefore, the impact was quite different from now. Why would you do so? For a very simple reason. The authority here, represented by Ministry of Information, last week, for instance, they have published a list of more than 70 information resources, including leading independent media outlets, including Radio Free Europe, including other internet independent media, that essentially are blocked here in Belarus, so you cannot access them. In addition to that, what did they introduce to this list are also websites of the most popular VPN clients. So for example, if you are eager to download, Surfshark, and this is not an endorsement, not advertisement, it's just an example. You cannot download Surfshark from their website right now. And clearly, if you want to use VPN, you need to use installation file somewhere, right? But by the moment this measure was introduced, all of people in Belarus, they have apparently learned what it is VPN and how to use proxies, and all of independent media, they have transferred their operations to Telegram channels as a key source of information. Telegram remained basically the only source of information that was operational although with a huge delay. Normally, the latency here is around 500 milliseconds on Telegram, and this is quite a tremendous latency, I must admit. In normal reality, normal world, it's 1 millisecond, right, or 2. So to put this story short, one thing is a technological dimension, and it has emerged. The other thing is that it is a synergy between technological advancement and internal mood and people's capacity to bring this horizontal driven mobilization to offline world. We have witnessed this on a number of occasions, of a number of times. This is day 24 of protests in Belarus. Internet was essentially shut off here in Minsk, mobile internet at least, on last Sunday. So it is a common case. Whenever you have a larger rally happening, and we talk not necessarily 200,000 people bringing up together a rally, but we talk even 10,000 of that scale, normally you would have troubles with mobile internet connection. Most of mobile operators and networks, they have started to recognize that. So they are now keen to inform people in advance about that. But again, they are arguing that this is a decision that is driven by regulations of authorities. So essentially, they cannot do anything about that because they don't want to lose their licensing. And this is one of the aspects here. There are certain VPN clients like Psyphone that has already disseminated information that more than 1.5 million users have downloaded Psyphone from Belarus to their devices in the course of internet blockade of last week. So this is quite impressive figures indeed. And the last aspect is that it's not only about high tech, it's also about low tech. And the low tech stands for a very simple and very tangible example that I would like to sum up my introduction. And it's following. In the place I stay right now in Minsk, this is just a typical panel housing as you would have in any post-Soviet, post-socialistic world, where you have this nine-story building. And in the days of August 9th till August 12th, when essentially there was no internet connection without VPN here in this country, what people living in this apartment building did, they have placed USB sticks with installation files at the entrance to the elevator in the building I live for people to use this installation files and to be able to install VPN clients on their laptops in order for them to be able later to use VPN clients, right? Because otherwise, how to use VPN whenever you don't have an internet to download it, right? So this is a very good example how online and offline, how high-tech and low-tech, and how essentially those earlier underprivileged group now are gaining from basically egalitarian character of how technology has advanced and empowering people to strive for their rights, to strive for their dignity. And this is something worth observing, and I think it will also provide a huge number of research articles, I believe, will be written on this topic. And thank you once again for inviting me.
Thank you, Maximas. Now I would like to pass the microphone, virtual microphone, to Roman. And I remember before Maidan was starting and Ukrainian reporter Mustafa Nayem was writing his message on Facebook, he sensed one danger, how social networks can not help really to build a social movement. He wrote, please come physically to the Maidan Square. Likes do not count. As sometimes in social networks, the civic engagement finishes with liking, commenting, sharing, and it's really important how to use the technologies in order to really bring people physically out on the streets or into the squares. So, Roman, please share the experience from Ukraine.
Thank you for having me. I also would like to note that I was not organizing protests myself, but I was just a witness there and a participant. So yeah, actually many people think that Euromaidan started from Mustafa Nayem's famous post on Facebook, where he said that, like, bring warm clothes and come to Maidan and bring your friends. And indeed, it started from this one. So people started protesting, and that's the first thing that I wanted to notify, that actually expression is kind of twofold, right? As you mentioned in the topic, it's a digital space and also like the real world space. And the second one is more important, and I think it's more important everywhere, in Belarus, in Ukraine, and in any other action, because the digital space is only empowering the speech and only like calling people for action, but only when people go outside and show their dissent with political power, some decisions, that actually counts. Because as you said, right, likes doesn't count. Like thousands of likes will not, influence any politician to roll back any political decision. And especially now when both political regimes and people know how to make those counters count and make thousands of likes per page. So it's not that hard right now. So, and about the Ukraine in 2013-14. So first of all, I wanted to know slightly about the statistics at the time. So in 2013, there was not so many people having 3G access in Ukraine, for instance. So we didn't have like people streaming YouTube, like staying next to each other or something. Only 1 million users using like 3MOP 3GS. It was operator. Not one cellular mobile network operator provided 3G access. So people in common did not have an access to the like speedy mobile internet. And according to InMind, Ukrainian research agency, around 42% penetration rating of the internet was at the time. So not even the half of the country had internet connection at the moment. But anyway, it worked, and around 29% were users of Facebook or used it on a daily basis, and around 60% used VK Kentucky. Now it's far less because we have a block of the VK, but at the moment it was quite popular, and I bet in the overall post-Soviet space it was the case, and probably still the case. So first of all, some huge communities emerged in Facebook, VK. One of them, it was Euromaidan and Euromaidan SOS. So both of them were dedicated to some news announcements of huge gatherings that usually took place every Sunday. So people just gathered for rallies every Sunday. And also, Euromaidan SOS posted information about missing people, missing journalists, because people were, detained, captured, and they were just MIA, so missed. And it was like really nicely worked. And also, people used Twitter, which is not actually the most popular social network even right now in Ukraine, but people used it widely because it provided you with an ongoing flow in information. It was pretty fast, you got an updates every second, and it was more like expert discussion kind of, so that was easy. And also Facebook was used for analytics, because I will get to this right now. So because not so many people had an internet access, the main source of news were still TV channels, and some main and mainstream TV channels ignored Euromaidan at first place, because they were like kind of aligned towards pro-regime at the moment, and that's why they ignored protests, or like kind of tried to portray it as something bad. And there was even the case when national broadcaster, the first channel, they got special task to go and find some homeless people in Maidan to portray that it was the protest of some homeless people, which was not actually true. And many people are actually, quit their jobs after that. And another thing there is that we saw an emerge of online media at the time. So coincidentally, in December 2013, Hromadske TV actually launched in Ukraine, and a couple of other projects, and they gained their popularity by streaming events. So as I said, not all of the people got 3G access and speedy access to the internet, but at least some journalists figured out how to do this, and they streamed almost 24/7 from the Euromaidan, what was happening there. And many people just was not physically on the Maidan, but they feel themselves as a part of it because they just watched what is happening and they felt as participants of it. So I think that one of the main functions of social media and like digital means of communication is actually showing what is happening really at the moment. And when people see that something's bad really happening, when police detaining innocent people or beating them up, etc., it gives people motivated and mobilized to protest, to go physically there, being present and actually protest these policies. Another interesting thing is that, as I said, people used Twitter. They used hashtag Euromaidan, and at some point of time, according to Ukrainian NGO Watcher, they said that every 1,000 tweet on Twitter was with the hashtag Euromaidan. But what's the problem? Here we go for the harmful thing about the social media is that many people tried to override this hashtag and posted some hoaxes and dark stories about that you will get tuberculosis if you go to Euromaidan. Police and army, military forces will be attacking Euromaidan, etc. So they're trying to scare people not to go there. So here's we see how some of these measures that liberate people could actually be used against them. And we were really lucky at the moment that we didn't see any like huge shutdowns of internet as Belarus faced on August 9th, 12th. There were like some cases when Ukrainian online media, like Ukrainian Pravda, was DDoSed. So they quickly switched to Facebook and Twitter to posting their news. So basically the media started operating on social media. And I wanted to reiterate that we didn't have Telegram at the moment. So Facebook and Twitter was the only way, and VK, of course, at the moment. And another thing is that government used like different tools, and they even jammed some communications during the night from November 30th, 2013 to December 1st, when special forces beaten up students. They jammed connections, like internet connections, etc., in the specific small block of Kiev, just to get people from posting any information of it. But it was probably the only case, besides when they tried to adopt a number of laws that were like trying to that announced that people might get been detained for like several years in prison, receive several years in prison if they publish some anti-government messages, but it was rolled back, so it didn't really work out. And another thing that is like really powerful thing that we hold in our pockets is like our smartphones. So the government in Ukraine at some point started using SMS, so like satellite jamming. So they send SMS messages to all of the people in certain area at the Euromaidan and sent the message that, hey, you were registered as a participant of some anti-government protests. So they tried to scare people using the same means that like every person used to communicate with friends, to get more people to the protests. And that's really important to understand that digital tools and social media are only tools that might be used in any way, as you said at the beginning, and I'm like 100% agree with that. So it was the case in Ukraine. It continues even to be the case in Belarus, as far as I know, because government is also using kind of tricks to attack protesters. So yeah, that's probably my opening statement. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Roman. Now, Maria, I would like to pass the virtual microphone to you. I think many people here in Lithuania were surprised that so many young people came to the march supporting the movement Black Lives Matter. So the question is, even I mean, those who were criticizing the movement were really surprised and said that social problems here in Lithuania do not bring such a crowds out into the streets as the things happening in United States, which I treat as kind of a compliment for you, because you managed to make those events important into the local context. And how did you manage that? And also, how did you use the online digital tools, let's say, to gather
Yeah.
people?
So it all started from the fact that I lived in the United States for a couple of years, and unfortunately, I had to leave United States since coronavirus happened, and then the whole thing with Black Lives Matter started, and I was really devastated that I couldn't be in the United States to stand for those people, to stand for my friends, to stand for my teachers who are Black and who have to face the oppression all the time. And it's gonna sound funny, but I think as a very young person, I started using social media like a long time ago. And the social media TikTok started going around. It's like very popular now. And I started talking about Black Lives Matter and racism through TikTok. And a lot of Lithuanians, because I'm here now, a lot of Lithuanians kept seeing my videos. And a lot of people were mad about what I was saying because I was talking about Black people and I was trying to, bring more attention to it. But people were getting mad because, like, oh, like, why are you talking about this? And they were saying a lot of like bad things and racist things, and I didn't like that. But I still kept talking. And someone one time commented saying, "Hey, like, don't you want to make your own protest?" And I was like, I was thinking about this, but I was like, damn, like nobody's gonna come to this protest. And at that time, I was gaining a following, and a lot of people actually signed up. And the first day, I made the Facebook post of like, hey, like this protest is gonna happen. I was thinking like, oh, like 20 people are gonna come, nothing too big, we're gonna walk with the posters, then we're gonna talk about racism, why it's important to talk about this, why it's important to stand for same people as us. We're all one human race, and that's it. Like, why do people with a little bit more of melanin in their skin have to go through oppression and disrespect and racism? And then after 3 days, I saw that there are more than 1,000 people trying to come to this protest. I was really surprised because I didn't know how many people are going to come, who was going to come. And a lot of those people were um, young teenagers. They were young people who came out to fight for one cause. And it wasn't more of a protest. It was more like a march for Black Lives Matter to show solidarity for what's going on in America. And of course we had haters. It wasn't like a perfect protest where there is nothing, nobody's coming to protest against us. And I think that's the biggest thing, where in social media, right before we did the protest, a lot of the people were hating on the event, writing a lot of hateful comments about the things that I would repost. A lot of like the TikTok comments were really, really negative, and it put me down sometimes. And I was like, wow, people actually are negative about this. It's crazy because we all should be positive and fighting for one cause, but no, someone has to comment some weird things and really not nice things, and we have to put up with this. And I think social media helped us fight this more. Of course, like our situation is so much different than Maxime's or Ramon's, because come on, like our social media is opened up more, like we can talk about this. And actually I had this meeting with a lawyer. I had a lot of like threats, my life threats, from people who are like, why are you doing this? Like, we are going to kill you, or like, we're going to come for you. We're going to find where you live, and we're going to threaten your family. And this one lawyer said to me that it's good what I'm doing, because at some point I started overthinking everything because of all of the hateful comments I was getting, and because of all the threats I was getting. And this lawyer told me that it's good that I've done this, because it shows me that I actually did something what I needed to do. I actually put people up, and if I would never have negative comments, if I would never get death threats, it wouldn't be like the protests. I wouldn't get the um, to the goal, to the attention of people that I would have to. So it's always a negative part of the social media, where it's like we're having this discussion: are we silenced, or are we like putting more attention on something? And I think that a lot of people who are against this are trying to silence it by, saying weird things. They can comment on your post or whatever you're doing in a negative way for you to think like, damn, am I actually doing the right thing? Like, oh, am I actually getting to some point? But then you get all these amazing comments, people coming out to protest, people coming out to the streets, and you understand that, yes, we are doing a great thing. We're empowering each other. We're empowering people to do something. Because after I did that protest in Lithuania, there were so many more protests happening, because a lot of the comments were like, hey, why don't you fight for this? Because it's happening in Lithuania. Like, why don't you go out for this, for this? I'm sorry, I haven't lived in Lithuania for a long time. And the problems that concern me right now the most are the problems from the United States. Because I live there and I study there, and that's what I pursue. And I am not really into the Lithuanian thing. But whenever I came here, I did that protest. A lot of Lithuanians were so mad. They were so furious. They were like, oh, you didn't do that protest for this person, for this person. Well, I'm sorry. Excuse me. If you want to do that protest, why don't you go do it? Why don't you make that same Facebook post, that same Facebook event, and go out with your people? That's what I think happened after the protest, after our Black Lives Matter march, is that we actually encouraged people to go out to the streets. It's like, fight for whatever you want to. There was a protest a couple of weeks after our protest saying Lithuanian lives matter. It sounds funny, but they were going out for some kind of reason. They were mad about the Black Lives Matter march, but they also wanted to make their own protest of Lithuanian lives matter. I'm sorry, but Lithuanians are not oppressed. As for example, for Ukraine or Belarus or Black people. People are not oppressed in Lithuania, but they still wanted to do that protest. I mean, sure, do it. And we encouraged people to do those protests. After that, I saw Belarusian people just coming together in Vilnius and center, and they were all talking about the problems in Belarus. And actually, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like, people are standing here with flags, and I was like, this is amazing, because we encourage people to go out. And I think with social media here in Lithuania, at least with the younger generation social medias, for example, Instagram or TikTok, we brought a lot of people together, because while I was talking about racism, my following was growing, and a lot of people were wanting to go out to the streets or like support this cause. And I was, as I said, I was scared that nobody's gonna come. But I think with social media and the way you empower people to talk about certain stuff, when you have social media and you talk about certain things, it empowers people. They're like, wow, okay, this is actually what's going on in the world, and I think we should all fight for it. As a young generation, we all have change to make. We have people who watch us. So for me, as a young person who can spread the word, I think it's a really good way to do it through social media. Um, the problem is that what I'm seeing, I'm listening to you guys, and I'm like, wow, that's crazy how the government of your countries are just silencing people, because they know that the next thing that's going to empower people, the thing that's going to make a change, is going to be social media, because that's how we all connect. If we're all locked down in a quarantine right now, this is how we connect. We connect through internet. And I think the government is trying to silence us through every single way. If we don't come out to the streets, they're going to silence us on social media. They silence us on social media, we go out and fight more. And I think that it's really unfortunate that certain countries have to go through this, that there's this dictatorship vibe that, like, oh, yeah, you have social media, you're trying to talk about something, well, I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to shut your internet down. I'm going to silence you as much as I can, because I don't want my people to talk the truth, because they know they can be put down by social media and a newer generation that's trying to fight something that's not right. So I think it's very important to have social media, to talk through social media about certain things. But in my case, it was really helpful. I empowered a lot of people to do certain things. We went out and protested, and it was a great movement that we made. And I'm still talking about certain things on social media, same with like women rights, feminism, about body shaming, animals, whatever it is. Through social media, we can fight a lot of things. And hopefully, very, very soon, our newer generation is gonna um, come out and help our world, I guess, because right now we're kind of stuck between like older people who are trying to silence the younger, because we're so stupid. We are so we don't have brains. We use social media for stupid things. No, we don't. We do a lot of great things on social media, and I think social media is the future to empower people to do a lot of great things. So yeah, I think that's how I think about it.
Thank you, Maria. And now, Edwin, it's your turn. Thanks for listening so patiently. Fridays for Future was a activity that was lasting long term. And the important question is here how to make people commit to the cause, not once, like one Friday, but to achieve this long-term commitment to a particular goal. So please share your experience.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, for the longevity of the movements, technology does help. Like when I was thinking about what I should say for my opening speech, is that technology lets us be more effective with our free time in Fridays for Future movement, because we are doing this for in our free time, and we can't have a lot of effort put into it because of that. Like we don't get paid for this, and like, sorry, I messed up my notes for this talk. Yeah, so I guess I could start with saying how we started out, because like in Vilnius, there was a really small group of people who wanted to create Fridays for Future initiative in Lithuania, and maybe a group of 10 people started doing this. We started to promote our events or performances, marches, whatever, on Facebook, and without too many connections, with no expertise in activism, we started gathering people, and that was really good. Like honestly, I don't even know how we would get so many people. Like we had a march last year in September, there were like a few hundred people there. Like I have no idea how we could get that many people without social media. Yes, because like it would be really interesting to talk with some older activists how they manage to do things like that. I would imagine you would need bigger organizations. You would need a lot more planning. And yes, in Vilnius, a small group of people did it. In Kaunas, there's also Fridays for Future. In Kaunas, one girl just texted us. We were already active at that time. We met up with her. We talked about how we are organizing. And then she just created a Facebook page. She just created a Facebook event. Some people came, she talked with them, and they became Fridays for Future Kaunas. And it was really easy. There's not a lot of effort involved if you are really passionate about the topic, and if you are willing to spend some of your time, it's totally possible to fight for your cause. Yes, another thing that would be good to mention is international organizing, because Fridays for Future is an international movement. We had a conference of European movements, of European initiatives in the last summer, and it was really cool. We had the chance to connect with other countries, share our experiences, our tips for organizing the problems. We had some scientists talk with us. We talked about how we are organizing in the international movement, the structure of our movement internationally. And there were some initiatives that have came out of that conference. For example, we launched a European Citizens Initiative to have better greenhouse gas emission targets in the European Union. And we still are collecting the signatures for that, but well, it's going strong. And yes, that I think that's the main thing, because like the biggest problems with having a continued movement and prolonged like having lots of events and people dedicated to it, the biggest problem in activism is probably burnout, and we are feeling this ourselves. Like, it's not easy. So technology that lets us be more effective with our free time is really helping us. Like, at first we were using Facebook chat, then we moved to Slack, and that was a really big thing. And we don't need to talk everything about in the meetings that we have in real life. We have some like dedicated chats to some things that are not that important, and it saves time. It makes everything more streamlined. It's just good. Like, I have no idea how many bad aspects technology has for activism, like the collectivism thing. If some people are sharing and liking and commenting on our posts but not coming, like, I'm not really sure how many people there are, but I don't think Fridays for Future would be possible without the technology that supports it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Edvinas. I see that our 45 minutes ran out with initial remarks, but I still would like to continue at least for a while, because there are some interesting questions that are still remaining unanswered or just slightly touched. Just few weeks ago, I read an interesting story which relates to 2015, and it was about how the Russian trolls working in a famous St. Petersburg troll factory, so-called Internet Research Agency, how they tried to do an experiment in New York City, which later they developed into some more popular protest actions which were initiated by fake accounts or fake people. And there they put on one of the Facebook groups a fake post saying that if you come to this particular place at that time on, let's say, Wednesday, you will get a free hot dogs. And there they had also a webcam, which was live streaming directly to St. Petersburg. Then they gathered in front of the computer monitor and were looking at what was happening. And they saw people coming and looking around, looking for where they could claim their free hot dog. Of course, there was nothing, so they left disappointed. But actually, it was a sign for those trolls in St. Petersburg that they, from there, they could influence the things happening in far away countries, and they could themselves probably organize protests, street gatherings, and so on, which actually puts a question about digital literacy or media literacy skills. And actually, if our education at the moment is adequate to understand the challenges which come from the digital space. Roman, I would probably start from you, because the Affair Lab is working with disinformation a lot. You are working with the projects that try to educate people to be more cautious and responsible users. So what needs to be done?
That's wonderful question, and the question that doesn't have an answer yet. I would say something like this, because there's like multifaceted problem. It's not something that might be cured by one governmental decision or like some personal decision. It's just more than that. So in general, people need to be more cautious about what they are consuming, what kind of information they are like reading. And basically there is the term called like news diet. So it's something that we have like nutrition in real life, like that we get from food. So people need to treat information as a food thing and kind of like be more cautious of what they consume. And yeah, so it's digital literacy, first of all. It's the understanding of what kind of resources are you reading information from, who owning them, what is their editorial policy, and again, maybe critical thinking for people. So just prevalence. I don't know how you can teach actually people be more cold-headed and analyze every piece of information that they face every day, because it's like almost impossible. And like emotions are always like making us blind and just like wanna push this share button without even like trying to check the information, but it is not right thing to do. And what we are doing at DFR Lab, we're showing different techniques of how the disinformation is actually travels around the world, how actors are using some tricks to promote certain information, or as you said, like con people into some non-existent like rallies. And there was the case again in the US when they both, I know, nudged people from anti-Trump and pro-Trump protesters to protest at the same place at the same time. So these kind of techniques, they will be evolving, and we need to evolve as well. But the main thing is that a lot of work should be done by many actors, by the governments, educational institutions, just to teach people like maybe basic skills on how to work with information, because of right now we are having tons of information, and it is actually kind of impossible for most of people to just to understand and let's I don't know, put aside read everything. And that's why we're using some I don't know, mental shortcuts to avoid any information that we seem uncomfortable. And organizations like ours and the fact checkers all around the world are trying to do their best, but their efforts are only like partial solution. So there are like many actors should be involved into this, and the people themselves and their interests and serendipity for the truth should prevail over emotions.
Thank you. Maybe Maximus and the others, you have to add something, because it's really important question how to empower people, not only to organize themselves, but also empower in a way that they would be more immune to the attempts to manipulate their attitudes, fears, beliefs, and anything that can be exploited by the malicious powers.
Indeed, I'll be happy to share some insight on that as well. There is a huge discussion on resilience building, right? On how to make sure that people in countries that are either in transition period or are trying to cope and to strive for freedom in authoritarian regimes, or even elsewhere in the democratic world, how we make sure that there is this resilience building embodied as a genuine part of, as education system, because inevitably this is something that must appear as at a certain moment in the education process for children, right? Whether we talk primary school or secondary school, this is as crucial as what Roman was saying about nutrition, right? You have a certain, a certain regulation, a certain assumption of what is making harm to your health, right? We talk about your physical health, and there are other, manifestations of fraud, of disinformation that are harming not only your psychological state, but they can make some certain social harm, right? So how do you make sure that you are capable of resisting that? And in this particular country where I'm currently staying, in Belarus, in overall terms, so for the last 26 years, this regime has been putting all efforts at controlling the information space, right? So you cannot find any major TV channel here that would be a non-pro-regime TV channel. So this is also something different from Ukraine. This is something different from Georgia, for example, right? For instance, we talk Rose Revolution in Georgia in 2003. So one of major TV channels in Georgia was actually supporting protesters from day one. And back then in 2003, this was essential in terms of spreading the information, right? It is Rustavi 2 channel, if I'm not mistaken. That is one of the major independent channels in Georgia. So here in Belarus, the independent TV Belsat is working for the last 12 years since the date was founded from abroad, from Poland, because it cannot get accreditation in Belarus. For the last 12 years, they were not able to register in Belarus, and they're working here without accreditations. And in the course of the last 12 years, Belsat, for example, has also evolved. If originally, coming from its name, like satellite TV, they started working as a satellite TV for Belarus, trying to broadcast independent media provision for Belarus. So now they make a huge contribution with all this online streaming, and also using Telegram and other platforms to maintain that. There are other examples like Radio Free Europe, which exists for more than 60 years already, right? Which has been blocked by Soviets. There were other attempts by other regimes to block Radio Free Europe, and now again, Radio Free Europe is blocked here in Belarus. But this is not an obstacle for Belarusians to get access to Radio Free Europe through proxies, through VPNs, through their Telegram channel. However, Radio Free Europe journalists are so far accredited here in Belarus. Last week, however, 17 journalists were revoked with their accreditations. And here I talk not only about local media, I talk about Reuters, I talk Agence France Presse, I talk Associated Press, I talk ARD, which is German national TV. So this scale, and BBC for sure. So these were actually the journalists whose accreditations were revoked here. So it's a combination of, on one hand, journalistic activism, and I don't want to call that gonzo journalism, which is also another, type of journalism. When you are in the field and you, in a disclaimer, you declare your, if not affiliation, then your, support to what is being covered by you. No, I'm rather talking about sufficient presence in the field, right? When you can provide this information. And now in 2020, you no more need people with heavy Canon or Nikon cameras, right, to take photos, right? Everyone can do that. It's a question of, artistic capacity, but nevertheless. So, and in this case, it's a combination of all these tools being set together and supplementing one another. Right, and indeed, this is a real-time, in a way, feeling. However, I would say the strength of what is happening here also in Belarus is that it's a relatively compact country, although 3 times larger than Lithuania in terms of population and size. Still, it's not that huge as Ukraine is, because Ukraine is one of the largest, if not the largest country in Europe. Belarus is a relatively smaller one, right? So here, whenever you are reading reports on Telegram or elsewhere, And in most of cases, Telegram channels, they can be geographically attached to one or another point, one or another neighborhood. So this is why also local communities are capable of having their own platforms for communication, not only these nationwide ones. So you're able to get out in the field in a relatively short period of time. You do not need to go hundreds of kilometers, right, to get to the place where things are happening, because the geography of protest here has changed tremendously. It's no more only the capital which is protesting, but it's across the country. So long story short, resilience building is essential here. It must become a part of curriculum. There is no other way to do that rather than embodying that to curriculum. And then inevitably it's learning by doing, right? People here, as more fakes you are confronted with, more eager you are to actually pay attention to, how to select information. But it takes a while. It takes a while for people, to pursue that. And I think irony and humor are also effective tools in countering that. And the incredible posters that people are bringing out here in Belarus is one of the better examples of how you can also counter fakes, counter propaganda, and strive for your rights.
Maria, maybe your impressions about what needs to be done in order to empower people to increase their media literacy, because here we can speak about this popular saying that young generation is the natives of the digital world, and the older generation are immigrants. So from this point of view, even some youngsters can teach their parents, their granddads, grandmothers, not vice versa, as is usually in the schools, universities, and etc.
Yeah, so I was thinking about how after our protest in Vilnius, we, some of my friends, we were a bit frustrated because after thousands of people came to the protest, after that, only several spoke up about it on social media, um, continuing to talk about it, continuing to post certain things, um, have uncomfortable conversations with their families. And I've learned this, that you have to talk to the elderly people very calmly, very trying to like prove your point through their point. They're trying to prove you something. They're like screaming at you. They're like coming at your face, but you calmly tell them, oh, but how about this? You do this, you do that, and kind of play around with what they're saying and saying certain things that like plays around with their mind. Because when I just started the whole thing with Black Lives Matter, I was talking to my family about it, and they were really, really annoyed by me because they didn't want to change their opinion. They were just like sitting in that like mindset of like, no, this is unacceptable. This is not right. And then I kind of talked to them. I kind of like massaged them in, and at some point, my mom, I when I started posting about it on Facebook, a lot of my mom's friends and my dad's friends were like very confused of like, oh, why is she doing that? Why would she ever say certain things? And my mom actually stood up for me, because at this point I wasn't replying to comments. I was replying to the ones that was important to reply to. And my mom actually went and replied to that woman, our family friend. She went and replied to her the way I told her what to say, like how I changed her mind to it. It made me so happy because, at least I didn't change like thousands of people's mind, but I changed one that can already talk to their friends, that it can already like kind of um, raise awareness and uh, have those uncomfortable conversations, because they're really uncomfortable when you are born in a society where certain things like this are not right, they're not talked about, they're unacceptable to talk about. It's really hard to change people's opinions. And I think that our me as a youngster and all these people that follow me, that hear me what I'm saying, I think we have the ability to change the way our society perceives certain things like this. I think we have that ability, but we just have to find a way. There's like a joke on social media that Gen Zs are like the strongest generation on planet Earth, that they tricked Donald Trump and his rally onto like thousands of people coming, but actually nobody came, like only a couple hundred of people came. And, you know, he was devastated. It was talked about on the news, and it's like, oh my God, TikTok kids, they did this, they did that, they're so horrible. And I think that we are slowly but surely showing our power, that through social media, we can do anything. If we want to, we can raise awareness. If we want to, we can shut down certain things. We can, and I think that that shows the older generations that, damn, like social media is the next big thing. It is already the big thing. And I think that they're going to really soon understand that if you don't have social media, if you can't talk on it, you're not going to get anywhere, because spreading the world through how it was decades ago, and people would like, it was like a broken telephone. I'm telling you this, you're telling that person that. And it's like this chain of people talking and talking and talking. Now it's how many people see your social media, it's how many people see your post on Instagram. And it's like, well, keep up, you know, like your older generation, keep up, you know, do your thing. Try to keep up with what we're doing, because we're really fast. We can change the world like this if we want to. And we are slowly but surely doing. Unfortunately, we have older people in power, older men in power, if we talk straightforward, older men who control us. You know, they want to control us. They don't want us to control them. But what we're showing very slowly, that we can actually control them, because they're older. They didn't learn what we learned so quickly, like social media and the internet. So they're kind of scared of us. And now they're trying to shut us down, but we're not letting them, because we're not going to let them. If they shut down our social medias, we're going to go out to the streets. Because, for example, with the Black Lives Matter protests, we there were a lot of news channels that were spreading a lot of false information. It was like, oh, these protests are so violent, blah blah blah. Yes, there were violent at some point, but let's not forget about who started the violence. Police. What are we talking about here? Police brutality, etc., etc. And there were a lot of people on social media posting real videos of that same day, for example, that was showed on the news, what actually happened and how it happened. And then you see it and you're like, what do I believe at this point? Do I believe the news, or do I believe social media? And I think at this point, I think we have that ability to see, oh, this is what actual people see going on the streets. This is what the world, the news, the people in power want to see, to, for us to see. They want to show us the negativity, the crashing and violence, but they don't show the peacefulness. They don't show the love that's going on the streets. You know, we're doing this to be human beings together. We take one thing that we have in common, that we're all human beings, and we come together to fight for our brothers and sisters. And that's how it should be. And I think social media is the next big thing, if it's not already, because we're going to rule the world with it. So, yeah.
Thank you. When you said that social media is a big thing, you reminded me of one of my friends when actually he got an invitation for an interview, and he said, okay, then the next thing I did, I went on Facebook and looked how many followers or likes do they have. And then he said, oh, I saw that I have more than them, so I'm bigger media company, so I'm not going for an interview. But a joke is a joke. It speaks also not only about the numbers, but about the responsibility that those who have those followers have towards the society. And Edwin, as now I would like to give floor to you. Maybe you can summarize our discussion on what needs to be done in order to educate a more responsible attitude towards those technologies that we can, as we said, use for both good and bad.
Yeah, so at least in the topic of climate crisis, I haven't seen that much misinformation between the younger people and older as well. Yeah, and it was surprising for me that during our demonstrations, like we talked with quite a bit of people that were just passing by, and most of them were either supportive of us or they weren't really aware of how big the problems are with the climate. So I haven't seen people who are, well, I have seen some people who are climate deniers, but not that much like in real life. But when we have bigger events that attract media attention, for example, in websites like Delphi or something like that, in the comments, there's like quite a lot of hate. There's lots of conspiracy theories and things like that. So for me, it feels like all the misinformation coming online that you see is coming from a small subset of loud people. And I believe that everyone can learn to be more critical of things that they see on the internet. You just have to keep reminding, and you have to keep talking about this thing. Like younger people, for me, it seems that they are more aware of this thing because they are using social media and the internet much more. Some older people are just starting to use Facebook, for example. My mom downloaded like 2 months ago or something like that. So they have to get used to it, and they have to understand that not everything is true there. So I think it will just take some time for everyone to catch up and to learn about this. And you just have to keep reminding about it. That's my opinion.
Thank you, and I would like to thank all those who shared their insights about what needs to be done, about what's happening, and how they were involved in organizing different initiatives. I was very glad to moderate this discussion, which I think gave some important insights, but also raised many questions that still need to be discussed and answered. So thank you a lot, and good luck in your future initiatives, both in education or organization of social movements which bring democratization to our society. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
From activism to connecting citizens from around the world. Next, Skaidra Podžiūnė, Senior Engagement Advisor at Ontario Digital Services, will talk with Darius Gaidys, Lithuania's digital ambassador, about connecting global diaspora and how connections and civic engagement can be maintained despite the thousands of miles. Let's join their fireside chat, enabling civic engagement from Vilnius to New York.
All right, so Labas, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I just wanted to reiterate that we're really excited to be on this panel, and a topic that's of great interest to me as someone who's tuning in from Canada. The discussion of, how do we keep Lithuanians connected? How do we talk about citizen engagement in the 21st century? And this topic of digital democracy is of great interest. So with that in mind, I'd actually like to start by asking Dado, the term civic engagement often gets thrown around, and it's something that I think I'd like us to work from your framing. So in about 1 minute or less, could you define what that term means for you?
Thank you, Skaidra. Hello, everybody. Just by the way of introduction, I am Darius Gaidys, Ambassador at Large for Digital Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and diplomat for past 29 years. So speaking about civic engagement, yes, there are plenty of descriptions, but basically I think that it means the engagement of people in daily life of running the country, being engaged in not only in highly political issues, but also being engaged at the level of community, at the level of the city or district or village, raising important questions and just creating public good for everybody in this community.
Mhm. I like that. I like that idea of creating public good. That's a good frame. So, with that in mind, as many of us may be aware, and for those tuning in, who are not from Lithuania or of Lithuanian heritage, there's actually approximately 1 million Lithuanians that make up the global diaspora. So those living outside of Lithuania. And from where I'm virtually tuning in from, there's approximately 60,000 Lithuanians in Canada who identify as being of Lithuanian heritage. So when we talk about this idea of like community engagement and civic engagement, how do you think people in the Lithuanian diaspora do not physically live in Lithuania, or have never lived in Lithuania, like myself, can really still feel a sense of belonging, a sense of being a part of democracy and connecting with Lithuanian heritage and culture in this 2020 era that we're in?
Well, think I should start with the idea of our president, Gitanas Nausėda. He raised the idea of one Lithuania when he won elections last year in May. So he said there is only one Lithuania. And all of us, me, you, and everybody else is a part of that Lithuania, meaning that living in Lithuania or living abroad, all of us, we are the part of Lithuania. So the question is how to connect each and everyone and to work for the greater purpose for our country. I spent last 4 years in Los Angeles, where I was appointed as a consul general, and coming to Los Angeles, and before that I was also working in Bulgaria, in London, in New York. I saw that somewhat our Lithuanian communities abroad, especially in the United States, they a little bit, they lost the sense of direction. During Soviet occupation, Lithuanian communities abroad, they had the main task keeping Lithuania, well, basically gaining independence. So the independence was what united all of them. Right now, I think there is some confusion because people are just trying to go into some economic direction, maybe somebody trying to go into political, cultural direction, but there is no certain line. And how we can connect all people living abroad. Before many years, we had some traditional meetings, not online, but physical meetings, be it in some community houses, be it in churches. And now I think it's about time, to go online, to be in a virtual cloud, let's say. It's easier to connect people. A lot of things are being transferred into the virtual world from physical world. And I think this is the future that we should all explore and apply in our daily life.
Mm-hmm. Can you sort of elaborate on that a little bit? So this idea of kind of like moving a community that's been, traditionally in person and moving them to the cloud, like what does that kind of look like for you? Like what are some sort of examples or sort of inspirations that make you think that way, or think that Lithuanians abroad can really embrace that or should embrace that?
I think we see that Lithuanian Saturday schools are being moved online. So this is one of those events that I was raising even 2, 3, 4 years ago in Los Angeles. Because Los Angeles is a vast city in geographical terms, and the people to Saturday school, they are coming as far as San Diego in south, which is 3 hours drive, and Bakersfield in North Los Angeles, which is also 3 hours drive one way. So the idea was that for them, to make their life easier and more pleasant for children, especially, why not to go online? Why not teach some maybe languages online? Because you cannot teach dancing online, but you can teach a language. You can teach history, geography online quite easily. Mm-hmm. So I think online schools is one of the opportunities. I think some meetings are being online. Some online gatherings are also a good idea. So this is just the beginning. So I think it's going to develop with the new technological tools pretty well.
Yeah, and those are great examples. And I think too, like so much of that is also like online communications, right? And so how do you keep people connected? And so I was reading that you in your capacity as consul general in Los Angeles, you had actually started an online publication called Vakarų Vėjai, which translates to Western Winds, to not only let the community know events that are happening, but actually kind of give perhaps a bit of a voice to the consul, to provide some opinions, to provide some perspectives. And talking about democracy, I think communication is such a huge part of that, really creating that channel between government and its citizens. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the role of embracing digital engagement, digital communication has in really linking the global diaspora.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Digital communication is one of many, let's say, parts of digital engagement. And it's very important, to spread the information. Nowadays, anyone who is online, who is in some social network, be it YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or some other, he or she is already a media outlet. If he or she posts some information, he is already spreading the information to the world. Maybe he or she has 10 followers, maybe 10 million, but anyway, this person is a media outlet. So the idea was to spread our information about our daily work, what is the consulate, what our tasks, what is our daily routine, what we are doing to people in the Western community, Western United States community. During this process, we just noticed that people, I think they lack information from Lithuania. So we started to filter news from Lithuania, from our official sources, and put some relevant and interesting source online. Therefore, this way we developed our website, Vakarų Vėjai. And when I left, just before leaving Los Angeles, we decided that we should move this website from purely consular website to community website. So now it's being jointly managed by Consulate General in Los Angeles, by Lithuanian community of Los Angeles and other communities, and also by our Catholic Church, St. Casimir Church in Los Angeles, because this is the center and the hub of Los Angeles Lithuanian life. And their voice is very important in that community.
And has this way of linking groups, has that really filtered into your role as a digital affairs ambassador? Has communications, that thinking of linking, that thinking of the possibility of digital, linking many communities together, how has that now influenced your new role? And maybe you could just also take a moment to kind of elaborate a little bit on some of the priorities that you're facing, and because again, this idea of being responsible for a digital agenda, that's still a relatively new concept in government. In Canada, where I'm working too, we only just appointed a Ministry of Digital Affairs and a bureaucrat to look over that in the last 5 years. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you go from, building this sort of online community, all this support on the consulate side, linking the diaspora, and then now taking on this portfolio that's quite new to government, but at least from where I sit, a lot of parallels or a lot of synergies exist between the two worlds.
Absolutely. So this is, as you rightly pointed, so this is the new portfolio in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I have basically two major tasks. One task is our internal task within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And my idea is to make our organization, our institution, belonging to 21st century, maybe even to 22nd century. So the idea is to adapt as many technical innovations in our daily work as possible. We started with some small but very important tasks. Like we have a chatbot, we have a fake news filter. We are planning to have our internal system to make our daily reporting easier. We are also working with the GovTech lab on establishing remote identification of consular clients, so that the people who can be remotely identified, they do not necessarily need to fly over from, let's say, from Hawaii to Los Angeles, or from Wisconsin, let's say, to New York, saving time and money, of course, and make it easier. So this is my internal, basically, the task. And looking externally, the biggest task is how to present Lithuania. abroad. As a modern tech-savvy country, we have a lot to brag about. For example, we have more than 600, well, maybe not more, but around 600 public services online in one single platform, on e-government platform. So any Lithuanian citizen can log in and change driver's license online. He can sign powers of attorney. He can enroll a child into the preschool or school. So a lot of services that are online in one single platform. This is very big, but not everybody knows abroad. We just opened the open data, governmental open data platform. So basically the governmental institutions are opening data files. They are anonymized, of course, and they are open for everybody and free to use to make some explorations. So my task is to spread the word, and I am doing in my daily life.
That's so interesting. I didn't even realize that so many of these services could be done online. That's that's fantastic. And I'm just curious, like what are some of the, the next, like the next services to move online? Like what are, you mentioned driver's licenses, but what's what's in the queue, what's to come? And especially when we think of like Lithuanians, again, not living in Lithuania, what are some services do you think people would really would find really useful?
It's difficult to say. First of all, you need to explore those 600 services, and they are a lot. You can write a complaint, to police to report a crime and many things. But yeah, this is a really big achievement of our government, to having all this in one place. Because there are more services, but they are scattered around. But to have in one portal, it's very important. And I think every day we are just getting more and more. It's very difficult to predict, what kind of services are going online, but it's getting governmental. And if we speak about private initiatives, we just saw a huge when the pandemic hit. We saw that, for example, online sales just flourished. The services such as Barbora, the home delivery from supermarkets just flourished. We have many companies that are delivering food from restaurants. So everything is going online and getting spread out. So this is very important for us. It shows that we are, the businesses are adapting to new realities and looking forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in addition to businesses, obviously, I'd like to point our attention to sort of this idea, this move to allow online voting to be an option for those in the diaspora, right? And so, at least I know from my community, that's a very exciting service in terms of connecting Lithuanians abroad and really just sort of joining this movement to try and get folks to feel like they can actually participate in democracy from the comfort of their home or from where they live. And so noting that Lithuania's parliamentary elections are tracking for October 11th, and that the Lithuanian government has now officially backed a pilot version for those living abroad to test online voting. And again, noting that Estonia, our Baltic neighbor, has provided the option for citizens to online vote for over a decade now, with great uptake and consistency, and cybersecurity really folded into the process. Really just curious, like, what is the Lithuanian government learning as they explore this new way of engaging citizens in a vote that is, quite historic in terms of how we vote or could vote?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that online voting is probably the great tool how to engage people living abroad. Well, everybody knows that we have paper voting, be it in person or by mail. So now there is an experiment with online voting. Although I am a tech ambassador, the digital ambassador, I might concern like some ludite person, and online voting it's good, but there are some concerns with it. For example, the security of voting. Cybersecurity is the most important issue. Another issue is what is happening at the end user side. Do we know if the person who digitally identified himself as, let's say, Darius Gaidis, is it him voting or somebody else is voting in his name with the stolen identity? How the administration knows that this is my free will, that nobody's standing behind my back and showing which box to mark, at which name of the candidate. So there are many questions about online voting, but again, we need to start. So I think it's good if we start with the Lithuanians voting abroad to see what's happening. And then, yes, the lessons learned will be analyzed and we will move forward from that. But as I said, digital voting is one of the greatest tools for the democracy, as well as the petitions. Probably you know that we have a long petitions that every Lithuanian citizen may submit a petition to Lithuanian authorities. There is a website, www.peticios.lt. I just checked, there are hundreds of petitions right now being published. People may sign electronically. And the most popular one, I'm not sure about the content of the petition, if it's right or wrong, but anyway, the most popular petition right now has almost 18,000 signatures. It's huge. So that means that the 18,000 of Lithuanians, they know how to get online. They know where to find this website. Right. They know the use of it, and they express their will, and they subscribe to the petition. It concerns our Minister of Health. Yeah. So these tools are very important for digital democracy.
Yeah, definitely. And do you? I mean, I don't know if you have this answer, so not to throw you up under the bus, but do you have a sense of like how many Lithuanians abroad might actually like consider using online voting? Like, do you have a sense of if it'll be comparable to sort of like mail-in voting or like even just like general predictions that the government is finding, or is it too soon to tell?
It's too soon to tell, first of all, because the registration of voters is still going on, and it has at least 2 weeks in Japan and I think South Africa and some other countries. In Los Angeles, I think it's until the end of September, so it's still quite time. Normally, from my experience, parliamentary elections are not as popular as presidential elections, because everybody knows that there is a president, that you have to elect one person, and for parliamentary elections you have a lot of candidates, and then you have those persons elected by the political party lists. So it's a lot of confusion. So registration is going on. The numbers are not that big at the moment. I think it's about 20,000 people as we speak today. I hope it will increase to at least 30, 40, 50,000 people when the online registrations will finish in 3 or 4 weeks' time. So let's hope for bigger numbers. And I'm very happy that there is a great initiative by Lithuanians living abroad. It's Mūsų metas dabar. So they are doing a great work online, asking people to register and vote. And also I should mention, as a great example of participation of our diaspora, that we have the leader of UK Lithuanian community, this district that is designated for people, Lithuanians living abroad. So I think it's a good example of civic engagement in a digital world.
Yeah, for sure. That's a fantastic thing. And I'm just curious too, like if you could put out a call to action to all Lithuanians abroad with respect to this election, like what are, 1 or 2 things that people should be doing, or that would be really helpful in terms of getting people to register. I think that's a really important note that, you have to register before you can actually vote, and there's confusion around parliamentary versus presidential. And so, what are some ideas, or what are some things that you might encourage people to be doing right now as we head into this election phase?
Absolutely. So I would like to say to Lithuanians living abroad that this is your chance and this is your opportunity. Unfortunately, one of biggest opportunities was missed last year when Lithuanians voted on a referendum on dual citizenship. We didn't have enough voters, unfortunately. So this is then another opportunity to show that you care about Lithuania, about the future, about the country, about the way the country moves forward. If you register and participate, you will have your own member of parliament elected by your votes only. Nobody in Lithuania will vote for in this constituency. So this person, whomever he or she is, we have I think 6 or 7 right now, this person will represent you, and this person, being a member of parliament, will raise questions that are important to all of you. I know that dual citizenship, or basically the issue of keeping Lithuanian citizenship when receiving another, is of the utmost importance. I know that there are many questions concerning social security, pensions, education, culture, keeping language, so a plethora of questions that this member of parliament elected by your votes, Lithuanians living abroad, will be addressing on daily life of next 4 years. So this is my call to action.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great one. And I think I want to kind of like just circle back to, you know, what the world can learn from Lithuania when it comes to engaging citizens abroad and really forwarding digital democracy and civic engagement. I mean, again, Estonia is always referenced, but I think there's so much to learn from Lithuania too. And, you know, going beyond these services online, like what are some other things that, you know, you really take pride in as being a part of this as this team government, but also as a way to draw attention to other sectors that are looking to kind of innovate with GovTech and digital democracy.
I should mention some great initiatives by Lithuanians living abroad, how to use the knowledge and how to use the networks of contacts and help Lithuania in business, basically. So global Lithuanian leaders, we have a great example that it's a network of Lithuanians living, professional Lithuanians living and working abroad, who dedicate a little bit of their time and a little bit of their knowledge and contacts to Lithuania, helping let's say startups to get entry in foreign markets, or making right connections, or just sometimes just coming back to Lithuania and teaching at the universities, at schools, and sharing their knowledge. So this is a life that is not very well known, but I think it shows our solidarity with each other, and of course being patriotic and the love for our country. I'm very happy with that.
Is there something like, is there, that's wonderful. And I think that network is such a key part of it, but thinking like, you know, kind of going into like what government can, like this idea of government as a platform you had mentioned, like, are there other key components that enable Lithuania to connect with citizens abroad that is worth noting for other countries that might look to, I don't know, borrow or fork or seek inspiration from what the Lithuanian government is doing in the realm of digital democracy or digital engagement?
So let's start with the elections. I think this is the best part of digital democracy, because it's directly related with democracy. I would refer to some interesting articles that I read recently. When the phone was invented at the beginning of 20th century, some news outlets in the United States were so happy, saying right now we're coming back to Athenian democracy, when everybody can be engaged in democratic process and provide his or her voice, over the phone. 100 years passed, and we have not a phone, but we have internet, we have online. So the democracy evolved, and the citizens' participation through elections, through petitions, through small daily works like reporting a pothole somewhere or reporting a graffiti. It's a daily engagement, and you don't need to think globally, but you can just do something very small for your community, and you can do it online. So this is where our country is moving forward.
Okay, that's excellent. And that's great. And, you know, I think you answered this in a number of ways, but I think, you know, maybe talking a little bit more about, you know, just to end off, because it's all about engaging from Vilnius to New York, you know, what are some Lithuanian communities, like countries or actual like grassroots level Lithuanian initiatives beyond the Mūsu Metai Dabar? So that's a great initiative. I think that's a good one. So Mūsu Metai Dabar, you know, our time is now in English. But, you know, despite not being able to meet in person and having to connect physically and online, what are some communities that are really inspiring you in the global diaspora that you've really taken note during this time?
I don't want to, to select one or two communities. I think every community doesn't matter whether it's big community like Lithuanians in UK or Lithuanians in Ireland, or tiny community of Lithuanians in Utah. You know, it's 10 maybe people. Everyone is very dear for me, and I think that each of them, they have their pride in being Lithuanians, being connected, and working for the better good, for working for Lithuania. So I'm proud of each and every Lithuanian community abroad.
That's a great way to phrase that. I like that. Well, I think we're coming up to sort of our 30 minutes, but I did want to give you sort of the last word and you know, share any final thoughts you have on this topic area, or just work ahead, or anything to sort of leave this panel with as we wrap up.
Yeah, well, normally the panel should end with the call to action. I already said one call to action: participate in the register for the voting and participate in elections. But I would like to call on every Lithuanian, be active citizens. Don't be passive, be active. We see what happened in Belarus. We consider the Belarusians, our neighbors, our dear neighbors, to be just passive people. And suddenly there are 200, 300 people, 300,000 people in the streets protesting and raising their voices. So maybe we don't need to go into the streets as Lithuanians today or tomorrow, but my call to action is for Lithuanians: be active, be interested in your community, be interested in your block of flats, be interested in your courtyard, be interested in your street, in your town, in your village, in your city, and be interested in Lithuania. Your voice really matters, and especially now in the digital era.
That's great. I agree. Our voice matters.
Good. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I think I'm going to wrap it here.
Approaching our final session of the day. For the final panel discussion, we will focus on deliberation, inclusion of citizens in policymaking. Can technologies actually increase engagement and help citizens more effectively represent their views, not only in elections, but in between? Joining us today, we have Mauricio Mejia, policy analyst at OECD, Rimvydas Baltaduonis, coordinator of the civic initiative LTI Vote, Pablo Aragon, researcher at Eurocat and board member of Decidim, Patrick Berkmans, Director Digital Democracy, Citizen Interactions and Web Accessibility at Belgian Federal State, Ieva Dunčikaitė, project leader at Transparency International Lithuania, who will be moderating the discussion.
So hello everyone, and welcome to our last panel discussion of today. I think it will be one of the most interesting ones because we will try to answer the question whether digital citizens can save democracy. We have all been witnessing how digital innovation has been transforming democracies. At least I know I have been using more open parliamentary data here in Lithuania or mobile applications to see up-to-date information about decision-making processes around the world. But it would be very interesting to understand what are the advantages and disadvantages, and is there a future for digital democracy? So with no further ado, I'd like to ask Patrick to look back 5-10 years ago from now and compare it to our lives today. How far have we gone? Did we make huge steps forward or not really? And what would you say were the most valuable lessons so far? Patrick, if you could unmute yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
It will help for sure. So if we look back 5 or 10 years ago, I think that the most important thing that we have done so far is that for common people, the participation process for citizens have increased in the common knowledge of the people. And specifically in the political sphere, a lot of politicians are now aware that there is some kind of new democracy, direct democracy with direct contact with people. And this is, from my own perspective, a very big move because it will help, after all, to communicate directly with citizens, and more citizens are now aware that there is specific participatory process, new democracy engage directly with the citizen all across the world. It's not only in Belgium, not only in Europe, it's also in South America, it's also in North America, it's in Africa, it's in Asia. It's all democratic countries are now implicated into new kind of democracy. And that's for me a very big move since the last 5 years. And it's also enabled via all the social media, who helps a lot into communication directly with the people.
Thank you, Patrick. Since we are talking about the whole world, we have Rimvydas, who is Lithuanian, but on the other side of the Atlantic. Rimvydai, you are also a co-chairman of the Parliamentary Commission of the Lithuanian World Community. Thus, it would be very interesting to understand and to hear your experience. How can you participate in decision-making processes here in Lithuania while being abroad? And is online, is digital the only option to do that?
Thank you, Eva, for having me today. Indeed, Lithuania is one of the few countries that has quite good representation and participation of diaspora in the parliamentary processes. So the commission that I co-chair, that has 10 diaspora representatives from different continents and 10 MPs, have been normally flying into Vilnius and having sessions for a week. And when COVID-19 came, we had to rethink that. And so very quickly, we started having those sessions digitally, online. And it turned out to be quite well and effective. And it shows that we can adjust quickly. But when we look at large, we are nearing elections for the parliament in October. We see how quickly an incident like a pandemic can paralyze our democracy and especially diaspora participation in elections, because in the past, the diaspora participated via usually mail-in ballots, and now we see that post offices and the whole system is getting slowed down or even paralyzed in some countries. Australia does not receive mail from many countries anymore. And so in the United States, where I'm currently based, post office is underfunded and they have their own elections to deal with. So that's why we immediately started raising electronic voting issue as a solution to that participation. And I have to say, I'm a bit proud that Lithuania acted quickly, sort of to address this issue, since we have a neighboring country, Estonia, as an example, and Parliament has passed legislation that would allow citizens abroad to vote electronically via internet. But at this point, we are still stuck. We are waiting for the solution to be heard, and 6 weeks are left until the election. So we moved quickly, but we have got stuck in implementation, and that shows that we were not ready to address pandemics, and that's a really mind-boggling thing, because pandemics are not anything new. It's not like arrival of aliens on Earth, and we are not even talking about Spanish flu or pandemics that happened a long time ago. We had Ebola, we had H1N1, we had SARS. It's strange that we did not prepare for a pandemic type situation, and we were so arrogant to think that we can always defeat it in developed and developing world.
Thank you, Rimvydas. I think e-voting is one of those topics that you cannot avoid while talking about digital democracy. But probably we should also talk about citizen engagement all year round. And we have Pablo here today, who is a board member of Decidim, an innovative online tool of participatory democracy. Pablo, how this idea came into light? How was it born? And do you think that those kind of tools, participatory tools online, can actually engage citizens better?
Yeah, well, that question makes me think about the first question, like how were we located 10 years ago? So when I was thinking 10 years ago, and it's part of the roots of the Decidim project, we were living like a wave of mobilization motivated by the lack of trust in democratic institutions. Thinking about the Arab Spring, the 50-man movement in Spain, Occupy Wall Street, Jose 132 in Mexico, Occupy Getty, like those times there was like a real lack of trust in democratic institutions. And I think that problem still persists and explains many of the phenomena we are living. But one way to provide trust in these institutions and in the democratic agencies that we have is to incorporate the participation of citizens and to be able to co-create public policy. And so the Decidim as a project emerged from the 50-man movement, like all the techno-political ecosystem around that movement that they were claiming of trying to get advantage of the capabilities of digital technologies to strengthen democracy by citizen participation. So there was one specific moment in Barcelona when there was a transition that a grassroots party that emerged from the movement won the elections. There was a need to make a new strategic city planning because it's mandatory that the strategic city planning of the Catalan cities have to be done by citizen participation. But there was like a need to use digital technologies to really scale up participation and to allow like the citizens of Barcelona to massively co-create the strategic city planning. So that was the origin of Decidim, a platform for participatory democracy that it was launched by the City Council of Barcelona, but now is available in many other cities like Helsinki, many cities in France, Mexico City, soon New York, but also in regions like Catalonia, countries like France, Belgium, Italy, the European Union, but not only like political institutions, but also like organizations like universities, human rights organizations, and so on. So it's a project that starts real from like all this movement around on this techno-political ecosystem to try to bring the capabilities of technology to scale up participation and in the end to strengthen democracy.
Thank you, Pablo. And I think talking about participatory democracy also kind of very nicely links to deliberative democracy. I think probably there are some similarities, but also differences. And we have Mauricio, who is an expert in it with his OECD team. Thus, Mauricio, if you could tell us a little bit about what is deliberative democracy and what do you think? Digital tools, can they enrich it or not?
Yes, well, thank you. Yes, what we did, we launched at the OECD a report in June, so in the middle of the pandemic and in the middle of physical distancing, we launched a report, the first international report on deliberative democracy, and more specifically on representative deliberative processes, which in a nutshell, it's when a randomly selected group of people that kind of represent society or a community spend some time learning, collaborating, and deliberating in order to give recommendations to policymakers. So this can be, for example, the Irish Citizen Assembly that proposed a referendum on abortion or in equal marriage. It can also be the French Citizen Assembly that focuses just on climate change policies. And so this is deliberative democracy, and it's part of participatory democracy. It's a way that we can engage citizens. I will not get into a lot of details, and we can share the link to the report for people that are more interested in getting to know more. But so what we were interested in is to actually, what you ask, can digital support, enhance, or is it a risk to deliberation? And we started analyzing this because the pandemic happened and because many processes couldn't happen in real life because people couldn't meet. And so with the question of how long is this going to keep going, we start analyzing and looking at how some processes were first moved from physical to online, and others were from scratch created in an online environment, and others were kind of hybrid using both things. And for that, we published already 10 articles on a series that is called Digital for Deliberation. And the idea is that we gather evidence, we gather information, and then we were able to share the learnings from this on how to better use, how is it being used, and what should we all do for digital to really support deliberative democracy.
Thank you, Mauricio. And it seems to me that now while we are talking that digital is all good, that during the pandemic, we came up with really innovative ideas or we made some steps forward. But going back and looking back this half a year during the COVID-19 crisis that hit us, were there any challenges regarding the move towards digital democracy that we also encountered? Patrick, if I could circle back to you, what do you think? Is it all just advantages with digital democracy during pandemics when everyone is locked up, let's say at home? Or do we also witness any challenges that were coming from this?
Unmute myself. Sorry, but I think we must not forget the fact that digital democracy, it's only a part of the direct democracy, of the new kind of the democracy. It happens in real life. So people gathering in order to discuss about things are also a very big part of participatory process. And with the pandemic, what we have seen, so we launched two participative budget, for example, in Brussels, by the way, by using the Decidim platform, actually. And so thank you, Pablo. So we are a great fan of it. So when we launched that, it was just before the pandemic, it was in January. what we saw is that during the first 2 months, so all the meetings and gathering were scheduled in order to meet people in different locations in the city. Without that, it was a lack of new or other kind of participation. It seems that it's more focused on the people with good connection, good know-how, who knows already what's participatory process. And it's kind of always the usual suspects. So male, above 40, well-educated. So it's not it's interesting, but we lost a part of the feedback and the interaction with other kind of people who can, who can directly meet the people for the project on specific meetings or on malls and direct interactions. And so we lost that specific information, and probably we lost some kind of new other projects, other kind of.
Thank you, Patrick. And Pablo, have you seen similar trends as well?
Yeah, well, it's quite relevant what Patrick just said, because we're talking about here about digital democracy, but personally, I'm interested in democracy as a concept. Like, we can use digital tools to strengthen democracy, to scale up the number of participants that can be in remote places, collaborating asynchronously, but we are talking about democracy. So these are platforms like the CDM are platforms that are aimed at facilitating participatory process for democracy, but not only for digital democracy, because many times where we are talking about using technology for this purpose, one of the main questions, and I understand that is one of the main questions, about the digital divide. Like, what will happen with the people that they don't have access to the internet, or they don't have the skills to get a proper use of those technologies. But as Patrick said, there are many other divides that are quite relevant, like, for instance, the participatory divide. Like, there are some specific type of citizens that are much more used to be involved in participatory processes, no matter they are offline or they are online, because they have the knowledge, and sometimes they are even experts on how to get benefit from this open process, that in the end they get much more power than some minorities or maybe majorities that are underrepresented. So I think one of the key aspects from the very beginning of the CDN was trying to understand, like, this is not a project of digital democracy, and this is not a project of online democracy. Like, an online platform should not replace the existing participation in the city or in the territory. Okay, so there should be a platform to facilitate that the communities that are already participating and the communities that are not participating get involved, because of adding this new channel. That this shouldn't be like an alternative channel, but an hybrid approach. So, for instance, in the case of the first process, the strategic city planning, over the 3 months of the process, there were like more than 400 meetings in the city, in markets, in civic centers and spaces, that people who were not used to be involved in this participatory process, they were able to discuss proposals for strategic city planning, to discuss the existing proposals in the platform, to support them, to add comments, but also to create new proposals that they went to the platform. So instead of having two separate channels, the offline and the online, trying to use the online to facilitate and reconfigure the settings of the existing offline dynamics of participation in the city.
Thank you, Pablo. Mauricio, but do you think that going digital and using online tools actually helps to include more citizens, or we can see only a different kind of exclusion of various groups, because we have people who don't, for example, have access to the internet, to name but a few?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it depends on how and for what we use digital. Because what we're learning from all of these experiences that we're observing of using digital for deliberation, for example, and we observe deliberative processes, but we also observe, for example, deliberation in parliament, deliberation in the justice system, because we think that we can gather some knowledge and some good practices from across the spectrum, how democracy is being performed by using digital tools. And one of the first learnings is it's very important to first know and decide how to use digital, because digital doesn't replace, as Pablo and Patrick already said, they cannot immediately and automatically replace social interaction, for example, and that's a big challenge, especially for deliberative processes. And for processes where social communication on how people interact between each other, how consensus is being reached, digital, it's important to very well design the tool. So design in terms of how do we communicate? For example, here we're in Zoom, and there's one way that we communicate. It's, well, two ways, by video and voice, but also by text. And this gives a whole perspective on how democracy is being exerted. Other platforms like Facebook, for example, it's mainly chat. And these kind of designs of the digital tools are very important when we talk about how democracy is exercised. These are some of the learnings that we're gathering, and especially it's that there's not a one size fits all in terms of digital tools. So we saw during the pandemic that Zoom or kind of Zoom applications, whether it's another type of tools, were used everywhere. But we never really ask ourselves, is this the tool that we need for the democratic process that we're doing? And I think that's one of the main learnings that we maybe take from out of this pandemic, is that we need to think, what are we going to use the digital tools for? Are we going to use them as a support? Are we going to use them as the whole process embedded? Are we going to use it for transparency of the process, for reaching a bigger audience, and so on? So depending on how do we use digital, then we can ask ourselves how to avoid exclusion. If it's digital divide, okay, let's invest in accessibility, in giving, I don't know, tablets and infrastructure to people. If we're talking about participatory divide, we need to give skills to people to be able to participate, and so on. So to briefly answer your question, the exclusion also depends on how we're using digital. And that's maybe one of the big learnings that we'll take out from this pandemic.
Thank you, Mauricio. And it's very interesting how you touched upon this question of what is a goal of going digital and having those all innovative tools and innovative online solutions. I saw in Lithuania that, for example, during the pandemic, the conversation about electronic voting very quickly moved forward, even though we have been talking about it for years. And Rimvydai, I would like you to share your experience, whether there were any other steps that you saw COVID-19 brought as a good experience, as an advantage, whether our decision makers actually were more open to different solutions that they've previously been.
For a long time, when we leave the decision to move to the next step or implement something, the discussions go on and on and on. But when you are faced with a threat like COVID-19, it seems like you have no choice but to act. And that's where we saw most of the progress to happen. People said, we cannot move to online teaching. We cannot move to online lecturing. We cannot teach older people to order food online, and they need to be provided with options. And then suddenly, within 2 weeks, everyone was shopping online. Everyone was putting their kids at the computers to take lessons and learn. And that shift happened very quickly. Unfortunately, that shift is not happening as quickly in the participation of democracy, right? There we see more discussions about the threats. Well, cybersecurity might be a threat. People might be manipulating this process. And I feel like there we get stuck very quickly again. In May already, more than 50 countries have either canceled or postponed elections. So that means we stalled democratic process in the free world because we did not have tools to actually move on with the process, right? And so when we think about sort of more complex and engaging participatory processes, and those are very important for democracy, but we actually come short at the very basics when it comes to participation. We don't have infrastructure to engage people, even in a simple one action to vote. Lithuania has to register voters who vote abroad every single time. We just had elections last year, and so we're having it this year again. So it's very easy to compare. In one case, we had an option to meet and mingle and talk to each other, and in the other, it's very limited. And we see drastically the results. So one thing that all speakers have mentioned, you cannot change the social interactions value. It's very important. Even for a simple action like register to vote, now we see that registrations are low because people in schools, in churches, in meetings are not happening because they are all online. And you cannot do that via Zoom as candidly, as engagingly as we did last year. So that's a drawback. And even though initially we saw sort of engagement, excitement, and we were able to reach more people online, organizing events, and actually people saved time. They did not have to travel across the borders. Now we actually see fatigue. So that's one of the probably drawbacks of the digital democracy, that fatigue is settling in now that novelty is going away. So how do we overcome that? But of course, in some cases where citizens never were able to vote, for example, Lithuanians in Latin America, they register every single time because they can do that, but then the mail never comes with ballots, or if it comes 2 weeks later after the election. So it doesn't matter anyway, it's only frustrating. So in those situations, we need to put something that works, and we have solutions. Internet works. And one thing that I would caution, more and more people are talking about the exclusion of voters, and it's a very important question, but for longest time, the younger generation, for whom things don't exist unless it's on internet, they were excluded primarily because of their habits and culture.
Thank you, Rimvidai. And it's very interesting that you touch upon the lack of resources, the lack of capacity. Sometimes there are people and activists who want to move forward, but then somehow we always get those excuses from the public sector, for example. So from your experience, Patrick, Pablo, Mauricio, what are the tips and tricks, let's say, to move forward and to understand that you are moving forward successfully? So in other words, how we can know that digital tools that we are proposing to our governments, public administrations, are actually successful and we are actually making a change. Patrick.
So the first thing is that I'm not only a big fan for open standard tools, but I'm also a very big fan of the implication of the state into a participationary process. So digital democracy is one single part of the global democracy, and as such, all the governments are responsible of it. So we could not say that democratic processes should be handled by a private company, for example, or by NGOs. It helps, sure. It helps to move forward, to scale the process, that's for sure. But in order to provide exactly seamless a self-process everywhere to everyone with the same accuracy and the guarantee that all the data are not used after all, that the security of the process is guaranteed, that this is a total transparency in the algorithm and total transparency in the coding of the tools, because it's very important. It's a question of trust. The people should be able to trust not only the process, but the tools itself. And so that's, from my own perspective, and that's also the position of my government, it's the role of the government to help the people, and so to provide tools to guarantee that the tools used are free of security issues, are maintained, are supported, and that they provide most of the time freely all the process needed in order to interact with the people. That's for me a very big move. That's a very key metric. I don't want to be that we measure the democracy and the digital democracy by numbers, by how many people are using it. It's also a question of, it's not quantitative but qualitative metrics. Is that and it starts top down. The government should provide all the local administration, all different kind of administration, to have tools in order to interact with the people and in their own way, specifically. But the tools must be provided and must be maintained, must be guaranteed by the state, just like another kind of process of democracy. And they should guarantee that the process is completely free and that there is no money in it. That's very important. People must understand that when they participate into this kind of digital democracy, it's not about selling something or selling a tool or using data. Not at all. Because if they want to, they can use Facebook for that, or Instagram. If they want to, they make poll on Facebook, and I'm sure that 80% of all the people in the country could make a polling directly on Facebook. But the question is, what about all the data? That's not the case if this kind of digital democracy is running by states. That's for my perspective very important, and it's really changing the ballpark of the game.
Mauricio, and what do you think about it? Is it top down or bottom up, the perspective that we should be looking at?
I totally agree with Patrick. I think, obviously it has to be a top down, and what I will add just to what Patrick said in terms of what the state or the government has to do, it's the institutionalization part of the process. Because what we're looking here, we should focus on the process itself and then question how to make it digital and how to make it digital that works. But the main question should be, how is this process designed? What are the results? Are we giving feedback to the citizens? How is it embedded in the decision-making process? And then we can open the discussion on, okay, so how do we make this process digital? And sometimes a lot of participatory processes and administration start the question the other way around. We want a digital tool that is very fancy, very well designed, but they never ask about how is this institutionalized and how is this answering the needs of the citizens and the needs of the government. So I think that part of institutionalization and of, let's say, design of the process, it's very important. And the last, all of this open by design and ethical design of the tools is very important. And the only bottom-up thing that I would add, and that I think I can link and then give the word to Pablo, is that we need communities also of users, but also of designers and of tech communities that are here to propose new tools and to exclude the big GAFAs out of this. And especially, for example, if I focus on deliberation, where it's the purpose of our research at the moment, is because we don't have tools that can answer the needs of the deliberative processes. We don't have tools that allow to make these kind of connections. We don't have tools that allow for people to engage properly in a consensus-based decision-making. And for example, a very interesting idea that we could look at a little bit more is the gaming community, because the gamers give us a lot of evidence on how social interactions can be built online, how can users that are not anonymous, are pseudo-anonymous. So very important to be able to have trust in who you play with. These kind of things are very important when it comes to deliberative democracy, and things that we can learn as policymakers, but also the governments can learn from these communities to implement digital democracy practices.
Thank you, Mauricio. And Pablo, what is your take on that?
Well, I totally support what Patrick and Mauricio just commented. I also believe that there is sometimes some fetishism about the usage of innovative technologies and about big numbers of participants in participatory processes. But we should remember, when we're talking about democracy and when we're talking about politics, it's about social transformation. Like, the goal of getting involved is to make meaningful transformation of our lives, of societies, and our ways of living. So I believe that citizen participation could be a very valid approach and a very interesting approach to activate collective intelligence and to improve decision-making of governments and institutions. So I think, like, having tools to facilitate citizen participation can be of interest, because we should remember that the cost of using technologies, but using any kind of methodology, is not trivial. The cost is high. So institutions should be aware of the practical benefits of using one technique or the other, one technology or the other. So when I'm thinking about using digital technologies, and in particular free open source digital technologies like the CDIM, but many others, it's about then they can bring to this institution the possibility to have like transparency, traceability, and accountability of their processes. So the cost of using technologies to facilitate participation is then it helps for the documentation of the process, and also to account for the results and to the progress and the implementation of the projects that have been decided in these processes. And in relation with the last comments said by Mauricio, remembers there is this recent study by Nardin Almer in the Center of Deliberative Democracy of the University of Canberra, that she was talking about top-down approaches in mini publics, concluding that sometimes they can be undemocratic, and technological solutions in oral deliberation can be undemocratic as well, because even though they are open or participatory, like the experts are the ones who are dictating the process. So when we are talking about using digital technologies in democracy or digital democracy, we have to consider who is dictating the process and who is dictating the technology that is being used. Which are the features that we want, with the specific design that we want of the technologies for participatory and democratic processes. And one way to do that democratic is to have, as Mauricio say, a community, because of course, like the software has to be free and open source, because if platforms are not free, they are not transparent, and if they are not transparent, by definition, they cannot be democratic. But having like the code open is not enough. Like if the code is open, but in the end, the decision about how the technology is built is taken by the same group of people, and group of people that are similar to these experts in participation that Patrick was saying in a comment before. Like in the end, all these platforms are mostly designed by male, well-educated people, like the ones of this panel, I should say, as well. But so I think it's interesting to incorporate participatory design, like to build communities that co-design how the platform should evolve or not. Otherwise, we are just opening participation, but we are not opening how participation must be, or the kind of participation we want as a society.
Thank you, Pablo. And since our time, unfortunately, is running out, I would like for you to make one wish, each of you, and just think about how would you like decision-making processes to look like in 2, 3, or 4 years. So I'll just start with Rimvidas. Just one sentence, 2 sentences. What is your wish?
Actually, Eva, can I respond very quickly to what the speakers just addressed, and then I'll think about one sentence wish.
Sure. Very briefly. Thank you.
Very briefly. We talk about the data privacy and the need for anonymous participation in some cases. I think it's very important to remember that some people are willing to share their data, or they don't care. They talk openly about their positions, about the thoughts every day with global world. And so we should not use that as an excuse to stall some of the attempts, experimentation, as long as digital tools are in addition to other tools, and we are able kind of to unify it in the more comprehensive deliberation process. So I think waiting until we implement one standard so everyone is protected, anonymous, might not be necessarily the best way to move forward.
Thank you. So whoever has a wish and a final takeaway from this session for our viewers and listeners, please go ahead. Mauricio.
As no one wants to take the risk. No, I guess my wish goes, and I'll just take the title of this of this session, that it's can digital citizens transform democracy or save democracy, I think. And I think my wish is that we need to look at digital, and it's very important. And I think that all the questions that we raise during this panel need to continue, and we will have more problems and new questions will arise. But we should focus on the process itself and how democracy is being changed by how we embed citizens in the decision-making process. And I think if we focus on that, and if governments, but also citizens, civil society, and the whole society itself focuses on how are we giving more voice and more power to citizens to participate in the decision-making process, and that reflects on the processes that we're organizing, that's my wish. If we all collectively do that, then the digital tools that will allow for that will follow, and we can have discussions on how to design, how to protect, how to build those tools. But that conversation doesn't matter if the process itself it's not participatory or impactful enough for citizens to engage.
Thank you. Patrick.
Well, I think that the big move, the big change that could happen in digital democracy is that all the politicians, all the deputies all across the world take into account the fact that they could add to indirect democracy a direct democracy to help them in order to build a new government process who integrate directly, but not only, but directly the people into the discussion itself. A fact that the politician can take that into account and see that like an opportunity of democracy, and in order to involve more people, enlarge the process itself. We are not in the 19th century anymore, not even though the 20th century anymore. And so people wait to something else, something more direct, where they are implicated. And so if the politicians all across the world can take that into account, it will be a very big move into democracy, and it will change it a lot.
Thank you, Patrick. Pablo, one sentence.
Okay, so I think that in the same way that we cannot imagine now democratic governments without being the result of an election process, I wish that in a few years we won't be able to imagine decision-making and policy-making without being the result of participatory processes.
Thank you, Rimvide. And what is your wish?
My wish that in a few years, as quickly as possible, citizens all over the world would participate easily, safely, regardless of the challenges that we are facing, whether it's new pandemic or displacements from other catastrophes, massive migrations, ecological disasters. We should be able to elect governments, participate in decision-making without interruption, because the digital platforms allow us to do that. So in global world where we all migrate, one day we are here, another day in another place, maybe because of work, because of studies, maybe because of some challenges that we are facing, we should be able to practice democracy freely, easily, and safely.
Thank you very much, Rimvide. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you, Patrick and Mauricio. It was very interesting to hear your insights, and I guess we will not avoid digitalization, and we should not, but we would definitely, everyone participate in the processes and have our own say. So thank you for a very insightful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining us today for the Embracing Digital Democracy sessions. Tomorrow, we'll have an International GovTech Day, which will bring together global GovTech community to discuss the progress of GovTech over the last years, from discussions around how to set up a GovTech program to showcases around the most promising startup solutions to fight COVID-19. Please tune in tomorrow at 12 p.m. at GMT+3 time zone. See you all tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.